For our ecology project, we decided to perform an experiment about plant growth in relation to their water intake. The goal of our experiment was to find the optimal volume for our plants, which we decided would be lettuce to grow. We knew there would be an optimal volume for our plants similar to an experiment conducted on sweet peppers that came to that same conclusion. Our prediction was that plants who received greater volumes of water would exhibit higher growth. This prediction was based on a study that found increased and more consistent access to water was beneficial to crop growth.
The first obvious step for the project was planting the seeds. Then we started measuring water for each of the different amounts. As you can see here, the measurement of the water for the first group, which was 50 milliliters. Then 100 milliliters next. And then 200 milliliters. The next part of this experiment included each week we took measurements of the leaf width and the overall height of the plant. As you can see there, Greg got the measurement. Then we would water each of the different groups just like before. Then as you can see here, this was our final day to check in on the plants, and they had grown a lot. We then took the plants and placed them in this drying oven overnight in order to get the dry mass. The next day, we took each of the plants, placed them in a weigh boat, and weighed them out in order to get the dry mass. We then recorded the data and created this graph.
As you can see from the graph, the plants who received 50 milliliters of water had a final dry mass of 0.151 grams. The 100 milliliter plants had a mass of 0.737 grams, and the 200 milliliter plants had a mass of 0.847 grams. As you can see, there is a difference between the 50 milliliter plants and both 100 and 200 milliliter plants. However, the difference between the two highest volume plants shows that those with higher volumes of water see a marginal increase in mass. This next graph shows the percent germinated for each amount watered. Out of the 8 seeds placed in each group, 63% of the 50 milliliters sprouted, 100% of the 100 milliliters sprouted, and 88% for the 200 milliliter group sprouted. Next, we'll take a look at the average leaf width for each group. The first thing to mention about both our plants' leaf width and height is that our 50 milliliter plants did not sprout until the second week of our experiment. By the final week of our plant's growth period, the average width of our plant's leaves were as follows: 2.22 centimeters for our 50 milliliter plants, 3.33 centimeters for our 100 milliliter plants, and 3.39 for our 200 milliliter plants. Once again, you can see a very large difference between our lowest volume group and then a marginal difference between the top two groups. Finally, we'll look at the measurements for the average plant height for each group. This graph actually shows somewhat of a different result than the previous two, which suggest the average final height for our lettuce plants is 8.2 centimeters for the 50 milliliter group, 14.98 centimeters for our 100 milliliter group, and 13.2 centimeters for our 200 milliliter group. As before, our 50 milliliter group is significantly lower than our two most watered groups, but unlike before, our 100 milliliter group is actually taller than our 200 milliliter group. As you can see from our results, our initial hypothesis that plants with the most water would see the highest growth was not entirely correct. This is because of the significant difference in height compared to the somewhat low difference in leaf width and dry mass. Instead, it seems that the ideal volume for our lettuce sits somewhere in the range between 100 and 200 milliliters. This is in line with a study conducted on tomatoes that found there is a specific amount of water and nutrients optimal for their growth. Going back to the previously mentioned germination, we considered the possibility that the 50 milliliter group's smaller size was actually a result of sprouting later rather than the other two groups. However, when comparing the group's progress, it is important to consider that the 50 milliliter group still lags behind. This further solidifies a factor of our hypothesis that water directly affects our plant's growth.